Looking to make some healthier habits this holiday season? Make sure to check out our Moving Through Midlife community over on Facebook, as we are doing a Planksgiving event where we are doing daily plank workouts. We will be doing an Advent for healthy, happy hips this holiday season, and then also have a sugar challenge, a 2-week sugar challenge that you might be interested in. Happy holidays! Welcome to Raising Healthy Humans. I am your host, Courtney, a personal trainer and health coach, and the founder of FormFit, a community where I help busy moms move more. As a busy and sometimes overwhelmed mom of 3 myself, I understand that it can be difficult to find ways to live and raise healthy families. It is my goal to help provide you with the information you need to help raise healthy humans. Today, I am excited to share with you my interview with Dr. Katy. She is a mom of 4 and a pediatrician who is on a mission to help fellow moms like you gain confidence and clarity in your motherhood journey. She is providing us with information as we head into the holidays. It's more likely for our children to deal with tantrums. So she's here to help provide you with some tips that will help you during this time. We also discuss nightmares, cell phone use or electronic use for children, and then the common cold and things you can do to help ensure that your children stay healthier this holiday season. So I would love for you to listen in, and I hope you enjoy it.
I am Dr. Katy Gibson. I am a pediatrician. I practiced as a board certified pediatrician for just over 11 years. I have 4 kids at home. So that'll be coming up on 4 years now. I decided to leave my clinical job as a pediatrician and stay home for my most important job in my family. So now I am home with my kids. My husband still works. He's also a physician. And I feel like that's where I am called to be right now. And so now I spend my time online helping to educate other moms, because honestly, that is what I miss most about my job, is connecting with other moms and, being that help and assistance to them. So you get rid of that overwhelming feeling, because honestly, I know what it's like.
What got you into pediatrics? Because I know you were in the military, correct?
I was actually, and that was, an unexpected journey for me. I actually am kind of an odd one out, because you talk to most physicians and they say, oh, I've wanted to be a doctor my whole life, and it's something they always dreamed of, or they might have had parents that were physicians. I have neither. So I actually told people I would never be a doctor. I just didn't think it was something that I could do. But even starting in high school, I went to a very small, more rural school. And one of my friends said, you're going to be a doctor one day. And I said, no way. And it kept coming up. And I was interested in, science and health fields, but I was looking maybe more into, the therapies, or maybe teaching, or, I always wanted to work with kids. That is one common thing. So I did think about that a lot, but I honestly didn't think I was going to do it. And it's kind of one of those things that I was just like, okay, I'll see where this gets me. And, I ended up going into medicine. And when I went into medicine, there was no question that I wanted to be a pediatrician, just because I've always worked well with kids. That's where my heart is. And so that was not a hard decision in that part. But while I was at medical school, I met my husband, and he was on scholarship with the military.
Okay.
And so we kind of had to make that decision, how we were going to work things out. Because, after medical school, you do residency and things like that. Well, he was tied to the military. And of course, they wanted pediatricians at the time. We got to go exactly where we want together for our training. But of course, right after I was commissioned, 9/11 happened. And so then it kind of, went from there. And I actually did, about 6 months after I graduated my pediatric residency, I got sent to Ramadi, Iraq for 15 months.
Oh, wow.
So that was quite an experience. And I did not have much military training. In fact, if you knew me coming, growing up, I would have been the last person you would have thought would be going into the Army. And there I was.
So you went into pediatrics when you were over there, correct? So you were helping the children.
I actually was considered general medicine. And so
Oh, wow.
I did see some children because I was there all of 2007, and it was a very active time, especially in the Al-Anbar province, which is where I was. And so they were bombing marketplaces and, apartment buildings and things like that. So there were children that were injured. And for part of the time that we were there, their hospital was not available to them.
Oh,
and
wow.
So they would come to the base. And so I did treat some children. And in fact, I flew with one because ours was kind of an emergency treatment. And then we'd have to bring them to another facility that had more capabilities than we did. And we weren't necessarily set up to see really sick kids there or really, injured children. And so that was kind of a big deal. But through that, then I also was awarded a Bronze Star. So awesome. We saw a lot of action, lots of bombs, lots of trauma. And then, of course, I was helping to be in charge of daily sick call for all the troops. We had Marines and soldiers on our post. And so a couple times a day, we would be there just for general sick call because, of course, people still get sick.
Right.
And top of all the injuries and things like that. So pediatrics also includes adolescents, and a lot of soldiers are, older adolescents. And so I was there treating the soldiers and Marines as well.
Oh, wow. I'm sure you have seen so much.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. It was quite the experience.
Yeah.
Definitely changes your perspective a bit on life.
Yes. Oh, I'm sure. So now you have decided to stay home.
I am no longer practicing, but what I am doing right now is just educating moms. So, helping to answer all those questions like, how do I take care of a cold at home? How do I help prevent food allergies? Everything. We've gotten over, fevers. When do I need to go in? Rashes. What should I be concerned about? And I just take some of those, questions, feeding and sleeping and safety and all those things. And I actually do a live in a free Facebook group every week. And I kind of go over just general topics like that, you go into your pediatrician, you have a million questions and you forget to ask some of those simple questions, or they may not have time to get to them, or they tell you just a couple things, but then you get home and you're like, well, how do I actually put this into place? This doesn't make sense now that you're trying to, do what they actually have told you to do in the office. So just kind of helping moms with those just general questions and follow up things that they may not have understood from their visits and things like that. I do not make any diagnoses or, official medical recommendations or write prescriptions or anything like that.
Okay, perfect. So what do you tend to see is the most common question that comes to you that moms are asking? Is there a common one?
There are so many, actually. That's why I have not had trouble coming up with a weekly topic for about a year and a half, to be honest.
Oh, wow.
I mean, everything from diapers and normal stooling patterns to spitting up and feeding. I mean, I would say those are some of the most common questions in the beginning. And then it's, car seats and I can't get them to eat. And, then they get into the tantrum stage and it's behavior issues and screen time and, just being overwhelmed as a mom. How can I keep going and find myself again? And so there, I mean, it's on and on. And of course it depends on the age too. But yes, just so many of those little questions that you wish you could ask somebody you trusted, because honestly, the reason I started is when I was first home, I wanted nothing to do with, being a pediatrician. I just needed that break. I needed to be a mom. I joined moms groups and you would see all these questions and then you would see all these moms like, giving so many different answers and opinions. And sometimes they would be shaming. And sometimes, you wouldn't know what to think. I always use this example, like they'll put a picture of a rash. Well, you get 100 different opinions from moms, saying, oh, it's this, it's this, it's this. And this one mom, was being told this rash was, bed bugs or some kind of insect or bite, and how horrible it was going to be. And I would cringe and say, oh my goodness, like this is something that they need to go in for right now. This could be something serious. And this mom was so grateful that I chimed in. But, I see all those, and I ended up leaving so many moms groups. And I said, you know what, I'm going to start my own, because I have the background. I'm a mom, I'm a pediatrician. Hopefully they feel like they can, get trusted advice, and I can kind of control the interaction, because it is confusing to just trust a random mom online. You are looking for reassurance, and then you might get shamed for your opinion. And that's why a lot of moms came to me, is because I'm very non-judgmental. I don't judge for anything. I mean, I'm a mom. I know how hard it is.
Right.
I've let my kids, I've fed them fast food. I let them have too much screen occasionally. So I know.
In regards to, you had mentioned children and tantrums, and I'm thinking about how the holidays are coming up. And this seems to be what I remember. My children are older now, but what I remember when they were younger is the roller coaster ride with them during the holidays, whether it be sugar or the excitement and, exhaustion and things like that. So how do you handle tantrums? What are your recommendations in regards to that?
That is a great question, because it's bad enough day to day, right? So when we get to the holidays, that can even be intensified. And it is for those reasons. And for one, kids thrive on routine. And what happens during the holidays? I mean, we're traveling, we have different celebrations, they get thrown off of their schedule. And then they're not eating their regular diet. They get more sugar, more treats. If you're traveling, maybe fast food and all these things that, they don't normally have. And so it just intensifies during that season. So those are some of the things to pay attention to. And I actually have a whole little workbook with all of my tips and some ideas to try. But a lot of it is trying to identify those triggers for your child, because honestly, it's different for every child. And I can tell you, even having 4 of my own, one is totally different than the other. And as you kind of take notice, you might figure out what their specific triggers are. So for one, it might be lack of sleep. So you really need to make sure that even if you're traveling, if you're having these events, that it's very important, and your events will go better if you make sure that they get their nap times and their bedtimes properly in their routine. And so if that is what will keep them on track, it is worth it to try and plan your activities and things around that. If food is a trigger, obviously we want them to have treats, right? I mean, you don't want to tell them they can't have that Christmas cookie, but maybe you just need to watch so that they can put a limit on them, or, take some home and save them for later, or, next week when they're not going to be around anymore.
Right.
As an extra treat, instead of letting them eat, 5 that night, when then they won't sleep, and it just intensifies, right? And the other important, I think, thing that happens during the holidays is we get stressed out as moms too, right? Because if you're traveling, if you're preparing meals, if you're buying gifts and wrapping gifts and decorating, and it's stressful on us, and they sense that too. And then we get short fused with them. And it's much easier for us to react rather than respond faster than maybe we typically would. So take some breaths yourself. Try and keep, your stress level down, and pay attention to how you're responding to them. And a lot of times, by knowing those triggers, you also know some of those cues right before they go into a full-on tantrum, right? Like Maybe they start getting just a little bit whiny, or maybe they start saying no, or maybe they have little cues that they're going to get there. And if you know those and you catch those, sometimes you can distract them out of it. So having distractions on hand, a favorite toy, a favorite book, something like that, where you can do it early and make sure you're spending time with them. Pay attention to them. Sometimes we get so distracted in doing all this prep work that they don't get as much time with you. And that also can trigger tantrums. So spend time with them, stay positive. Those things will all help kind of keep the mood more even, routine, and more positive.
Okay. I feel like tantrums are easier to deal with at home.
Yes.
So if we're out and about and our child starts going into a full-blown tantrum, do you have any recommendations of how to handle it, what to do? Is it drop everything, leave wherever you are, and deal with it in the car? Or what do you usually recommend to do with tantrums?
Well, hopefully, like I said, if you can identify it early,
right,
that's the best thing, but it's not always possible, right?
Right.
So if you're out and about, I always recommend keeping things handy in your purse. Like I said, distractions that might work for them.
Okay.
Maybe you got late for lunch because you're running errands and they throw a tantrum because they're hungry. So having an extra snack in your bag is sometimes all it would take for some, maybe a favorite toy or something like that. So distractions sometimes absolutely will work. If they get to the point where they're in full mode tantrum, it probably won't work. And in all honesty, I just say you get them to a safer place. If that means that you're close to the bathroom at the store or something, you could do that. Just kind of take them off to the side. You take them out to the car. Sometimes that's what we have to do, unfortunately.
Right.
But if you can be prepared ahead of time, and that's part of the purpose of my little workbook too, so you kind of are prepared for the next time rather than get caught up in it. Sometimes you can even prevent it from getting that far. But yes, if you're on full on mode, they often cannot be easily brought out of it. You can't reason with them. Yelling or spanking or anything like that is not going to do anything. It's going to actually probably make it worse.
Right.
And so just calmly bring them to a safe place and kind of wait it out.
Okay. For those families that the child, maybe they haven't worked through tantrums the way that you've mentioned, working through them, and they have a child who is in the store and knows manipulation, like so to speak, they're able to manipulate. How would you say to start working backwards with them to help them? Would you just start working with them at home, like you're mentioning, or because they know that, okay, if I cry too much or if I carry on, they're going to get me what I'm asking for?
Yes, start at home because that's much easier than when you're out in public, because it's just, they know that it's easier to manipulate mom in public than it is at home, right?
Yes.
And that's why it's best to try and start right when the tantrums start, because you're right, they kind of get used to. And one of my tips is to choose your battles. So, some things don't matter. Like if they want to wear mismatched clothes, you know what? Sometimes it's just not worth it.
Right.
Let them wear what they want. Most parents understand, most other people understand that that's not a big deal. Of course, when it comes to things like safety issues or constantly, always buying them something when you're out, or, little things like that, that you have to decide which ones you want to be hard nosed on. And then you cannot give in, because when you give in, that's what leads to I know I can manipulate mom because when I do this, she will give in. And so you just have to, start at home, go through the scenario at the store. Say they always beg for a toy or a piece of candy and you've always given in, but you've decided this is something you want to change. Talk to them about the scenario at home, go through it and say, you know what, then if we get home and we did well, then offer some other type of reward, like special time with them, or, I'll play your favorite game with you, or do things like that, would be a better reward than
Right.
always buying them something if that's the habit you want to break. And then hopefully they will understand, they can see what's going to happen before, but then you have to really stick to and tell them what's going to happen. And sometimes we just need to avoid the situation.
Right.
Say it's they always beg for a toy. Well, don't go by the toy section, or, those kinds of things too.
Right. And I like how you mention talking about it before you go, because I think a lot of times we get so caught up in moving, especially around the holidays. We're out shopping, we're buying certain things, and our children are basically along for the ride, whether they want to be or not. And they might be getting tired or hungry, like you're mentioning. So to be able to speak to them before, so they understand, like, we're going to go do this, then this, then this, and this is what I expect from you. I think that's very valuable. And I don't know, for myself, if that was something I even thought about doing with my kids when they were younger, but I think that's valuable information for sure.
Yes, it can make all the difference because, if it's kind of out of their routine and you're not normally running a bunch of errands but you can tell them what to expect, that's so helpful for them because it's that break in their routine that they're not used to. And if they know what to expect ahead of time and what's expected of them, it really can make a difference. Now, obviously, it depends on the age of your child. The real young ones are not.
Right.
And sometimes it's just important for mom to know that don't go run errands during their nap time, or make sure if you run errands, you have that snack with, or you don't, or you stop at, lunchtime or whatever.
Right.
If
right.
that's their trigger, because it can make a huge difference. And in the end, that little, sacrifice or planning can make a huge difference in how your trip out goes.
Okay. One thing that you mentioned earlier, and it made me think of something else that I myself dealt with for my son. When he was out of his routine for sleep patterns, he would deal with night terrors. Do you have any recommendations for children who deal with night terrors? Because it's very, scary for us when they are dealing with this, because nothing seems to calm them down. So do you have anything that we can do, or how to go through situations like this?
It mostly is honestly just reassurance to moms because you're right. Unfortunately, if it's a true night terror, there's not much you can do. You make sure they're safe. You try and keep their bedtime on routine, which definitely can help. And you make sure their daytime is, part of their routine and all of that. And unfortunately, it's sometimes just a stage you have to live through. But letting moms know that, they're not being hurt by this and that they are okay. You can go in, you can try and reassure them. You can sit with them. Like I said, you want to make sure they're not like thrashing and going to hurt themselves or fall off the bed or things like that. But other than that, there's oftentimes not much you can do if it's a true terror. Now, nightmares are different. And I actually did do a talk about, kind of distinguishing the two. And sometimes there are things you can do with the nightmares, and that's a totally different story. But if it's a true night terror, it's mostly just comfort and safety and kind of working through it.
Right. So could you speak into the nightmares a little bit? So if you have a child that, and I'm going to speak about my own family here in this situation. I have a child that at one point, they thought they heard screaming in their sleep from something. And it really scared them so much that they did not want to sleep in their room. For a period of time, for a very long period of time.
I understand that one.
So how do you work through these nightmares? And is there anything like, do you notice what is causing them, what may be causing them, or how to work with your children to get through this period of time?
It can be a variety of things, to be honest. Sometimes it can be a manifestation of what they've been exposed to during the day. Okay. So, now we spend a lot of time on screens. Sometimes you don't realize some of the things they're seeing, whether it may be, even though they could be watching, a typical show they watch that's not bad, but it could have been a commercial or, YouTube is a big thing now. You never know what pops up on those YouTube channels. You don't know what the kids are talking about at school or daycare. So it can be, circumstances during the day that can definitely trigger, those kinds of things, and that fear and anxiety that can, manifest as nightmares, or even make them more anxious, even if they do have something that's mild, but it really affects them. And it could have to do with just their environment and circumstances. So you do want to be careful what they're exposed to during the day, and that it is appropriate for their age and developmental stage. And screens, unfortunately, are a big culprit of that now. But I mean, I've had kids at school, even with my own kids, talk about scary movies that they saw or something. And my child struggles with that. Mm-hmm. And so even just them talking about that triggered that fear for him. And then he would have nightmares or think about that at night so he wouldn't go to sleep.
Okay.
And so sometimes it's even just hearing things like that, or seeing an ad for a movie that's coming out. Mm-hmm. They don't hide those from kids at all.
No, that's one thing I never understand is you'll be watching a Disney, whatever it is you're watching, and it's a children geared show. And then they'd have some terrible ad. I'm like, what? Do they not realize we're watching a kids show?
Yep. So you do want to be careful about that and just talk through those things. Sometimes you can't reason with them, but of course you want to reassure them that, these are movies or these are actors. This is not real. What is real at night? You lay in your bed, you go to sleep, you wake up, and we go to school, or we, do our day, whatever, expecting for the next day. So kind of repeat, like, what is reality? It is this. So, reassurance, sometimes some positive affirmation type things, fill their day with positivity, try and stick to those routines, pay attention to what they're seeing and doing during the day. And all those things can really help. Now at night, there are certain things like, you can go around and check their room. Some kids do better with night lights. Some kids do better with dark. But if they're more afraid of, monster type things or screams, like you said, or things like that, often a little extra nightlight or leaving their door open or something like that will help to reassure them. Maybe you read them a story that's more appropriate at night, so it gets them thinking about something else. And you can talk about, a positive story right at bedtime, and maybe sit with them for a little bit to kind of make sure they're calm. Some parents do the monster spray thing, you just use like some essential oils and some, in a room spray or something, and, do a little routine where you're getting those monsters away, but really, I think if they're a little bit older, you don't want to enforce the ideas of monsters. You want to, enforce the idea of, what's real and what's imaginary. And so really, I have an older child who's more fearful. So we can actually reason and talk a little bit. Younger kids won't be able to reason like that. But if they're older, you can reason and say, you're just scared of what is in your mind. Okay. You're not scared of what's real. And what's real is that your bed and this house is the safest place you can be. So when they're older, you can reason. When they're younger, you might have to do some extra, comfort measures and gradually get them back into their routine.
Okay. And you mentioned screen time. So from a pediatrician, what is your recommendation on screen time?
Yes. And this could be a whole huge topic. And there's been lots of changing recommendations and thoughts on this, actually, because really in our world today, you can't really get away from screens. I mean, we carry them in our purse or pockets now. So it is something that we have to deal with. And in all honesty, I'm not for total elimination either, because as our kids grow up, we have to teach them how to appropriately use screens. And if you totally keep it away from them, what are they going to do when they get the chance? That's all they're going to want to do. And they're not going to know how to use it, properly or with some, guidelines, because they never had them. And so, yes, when they're younger. So toddlers and preschoolers should really not have much of any screen time. Okay. This is a time that is significant developmental stages. That social interaction and interacting with your child is so important. And just sitting there looking at screens is not the same. Even if you think, oh, it's an educational show, they're learning the alphabet or they're learning their colors or whatever, but they're not interacting with it. So that's very different. And they need that interaction, and they need that social development. So it really does cause some harm in that, preschool and toddler age when it happens too much. And so the recommendation is to keep it very minimal, like an hour or less a day. And you should be there with them, and it should be interactive, and it should be appropriate programming. And really at the younger stages, now they don't say none. They just say, if we're on lockdown or somebody's sick, like, yeah, they can see their grandparents, on a, on a video call or something, because otherwise we may not get to see each other sometimes for long periods of time. And as they get to school age, this is where it's changed a lot. It's basically you kind of come up with a media plan. And so there's not really a set, like it used to be, 2 hours or less. I still think that's kind of a good guideline, is not more than a couple hours. But, now they even have homework that they have to do online. Right. And so then do you count that? Do you not count that? Is that okay if they're on for 3 extra hours, when they're teenagers because they're doing their homework? Right. It gets more complicated, but what you want to make sure is that they have active time. That's very important. So they should have at least an hour of active time every day. It can be split up, but, running around, playing basketball, throwing the ball, something that's active. Get outside if you can. Obesity rates are going up like crazy. And some of that is because we just sit down and eat in front of screens all the time. And there are other reasons for it, but, so you want to make sure they have that active time. You want to make sure they're doing their responsibilities, their chores and their homework and all those things that they are supposed to take care of. And then, of course, you want some times guarded. Like I say, there should be no screens in bedrooms, no screens at the table, keep a couple areas screen free, because family time is important too. And sleep is important too. So there should be a couple rules about where that's allowed as well. And then as long as they're doing the things that they need to do and they're staying healthy otherwise, then it's kind of up to you to kind of come up with that media plan to fill in the cracks.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. In regards to cold season, do you have recommendations, things that we can do to help keep our children from possibly getting colds? And then if they do get colds, how we can go about helping them?
Yes, I can. And this is always a hard one because, colds are viruses, right? So it's not like you can just go take a medicine and it makes you better, unfortunately. Right. I wish sometimes, but there is no magic bullet, unfortunately. So first of all, just being healthy overall. So getting enough sleep, drinking plenty of water and fluids. So, not all the sodas and sweet drinks, but plenty of water. The sleep is very important. Regular healthy meals with fruits and veggies and, whole foods, rather than just, the fast foods, quick snacks, things like that, which is not easy. I totally admit. But so keeping kind of that healthy lifestyle in the background and staying active, obviously, will decrease those chances. Washing hands is one of the best things you can do. So before eating, obviously I have to use the bathroom or things like that. But as far as colds, it's just touching all the things. My kids wash their hands first thing when they get home from school, because they're usually going to snack or doing things like that. And then they're home. So it's a little better. But, at school, they've been touching everything and all of that. So hand washing is probably one of the best things you can do, and do it properly. So teach your kids about hand washing. But I also don't think we can be too germophobic either, in my opinion, because your immune system does need to build up. As far as taking anything, supplements, some supplements that I do consider and can be effective, vitamin D is very important. And I live up in Minnesota currently. And during the winter, we do not get appropriate amounts of sunlight to make the appropriate vitamin D. And so a vitamin D supplement is something that probably is a good idea for kids to adults.
Question in regards to the vitamin D, is that something, should you be getting blood work for that? Or is there a recommended amount you should be getting for your children?
There is a recommended amount, and actually it's recommended even shortly after birth for breastfeeding babies. So in formula, they fortify the formula with vitamin D, so you do not have to necessarily worry about it if you have a formula fed baby. But breast milk, that's for how great breast milk is, vitamin D is lacking in breast milk. So we actually recommend 400 international units of vitamin D shortly after birth for babies.
Okay.
And then after that, it's a matter of whether you get it in your diet or not. And that's why some people really like, the pediatrician might ask how much milk kids drink, because most often milk is fortified with vitamin D.
Okay.
So you can get it in milk, but it's not hard to get. You can even get it in just suspended in an oil where you give them just a drop a day, basically.
Okay.
And the younger kids, it's usually still at about that 400. And as they get a little older, it's more like 800 when you get up to like the preteens and teens. But vitamin D, we're finding out, is more important for so many disease processes, multiple viruses, to many other things. So vitamin D is something that's really important. And, as the kids get older in school age, a lot of people will do elderberry syrup as well. That has been found to be effective to decrease the duration of things like the flu, where they've actually studied that. So they even make gummies now with the elderberry in it. And a lot of them will also have vitamin C, maybe vitamin D, and some of them have zinc. So you do want to pay attention to what is in the supplements you buy, so that you don't double up. Like, you don't want to get the elderberry and not realize there's already vitamin C or other vitamins in, but then you're giving them another vitamin, because then you're adding on to that. So you do want to read labels as far as what's all in there, so you're not double doing the doses without even realizing it. And then when they do actually get sick, it's really supportive care. Cold medicines, I do not recommend cold medicines, and they keep increasing the age for, saying first it was don't give below 4, now it's don't give below 6. And like I said, those medicines, they do not make them better faster. They may relieve some symptoms, but they also could do harm too. And so unless they're super miserable, I would do things like humidifier, warm baths or steamy showers where they're just even sitting in the bathroom and they can inhale the steam, nasal saline for little ones to try and, help clear out their noses when they can't really blow their nose very well. Plenty of fluids to keep that mucus thin. I know sometimes a lot of the dairy products will actually thicken that mucus. So, more water, less milk during that time that they're really congested. And I would avoid most medications, in all honesty, and just keep up with those kinds of things, because usually 7 to 10 days is the typical course for a virus. Usually the first, I would say, 3 or 4 days are the worst, and it's kind of peaking at that point, and then they usually get better. Unfortunately, things like cough can kind of linger, so sometimes that's a harder one to deal with. But hydration, fluids, the saline, and those kinds of supportive care go a long ways. Okay.
Now, for fevers, do you recommend the same thing?
Fever is a good thing. So fever is your body's way of helping to fight the virus. And by raising your body temperature, that actually helps your immune system work better to fight the virus. So I say, do not automatically treat a fever. And my famous saying, or, what I like to say, is to treat the child, not the number, right? And so some parents, even if it gets to 99, they're like, oh, I need Tylenol. And then, or it'll even be 101 or even 100. And they're like, oh, Tylenol's not working. And they're giving it every, 4 to 6 hours. I would not do that. And in all honesty, I believe that if you let them have that little bit of fever, often it will shorten the duration of the illness in the end. So make them comfortable. A lukewarm bath, cool wash rags, things like that, hydration, rest. If they are resting and sleeping, don't wake them up to give a medicine. Let them sleep it out. They're comfortable. Right. Now, sometimes it gets to the point where you need to give it. And usually for a child, for everyone, it's going to be different. But most kids, after it gets over 102, they're pretty miserable. If they're to the point where they don't want to drink fluids, they can't rest, things like that, then obviously, don't let them suffer. Go ahead and give them a dose.
Yeah.
So there are times where you need it. So it is something you should always have on hand. But the second they get a fever, I would not give it. Let it, if it just sits around 100, 101, most kids do fine with that. Kids are so resilient, and it will help their immune system work through that virus a little bit faster. And that people say, what temperature do I need to bring my child in for? Well, there's not really a number unless you have a baby. That is different. So
Right.
within the first 3 months, if it's a fever at all, you have to go in.
Oh, okay. Good to know.
Or higher, you go in, because unfortunately, it's a lot harder to tell with an infant, and they can get sick fast.
Mhm.
So in those first few months, you absolutely want to go in at the first sign of fever. But if we're talking about older kids, even like 6 months and up, I'll start with there. Then you can feel pretty comfortable. And when they're, like toddlers and preschoolers and things like that, you can tell more, by how they're acting and, are they eating? Are they drinking? Do they have, what other symptoms do they have? Are they having trouble breathing because they're coughing? Or do they say their ear hurts or things like that? So you treat their, you go off their symptoms. It's not a number. Like if they get to 103, you have to bring them in. Not necessarily, it just depends on what other symptoms they have. Now, if they have that for a few days, then yes. Or if they have a more alarming symptom, then yes. So it's really hard to say just this number, this is what you need to do, because it's different for everyone.
Right. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. Can you tell us where we can find you? I know you offer some Q&A opportunities, question and answer opportunities. Can you let us know where to find you?
Yes, the best place to find me is in my free Facebook group for moms. I go live there weekly. I do get suggestions on topics from members of the group, or I will just kind of feel out what I see being asked a lot in moms groups at the time, or what season it is, or things like that. And I go live every week, kind of answering one of those questions. And that is called Unfolding Motherhood with Dr. Katy. So you can find me on Facebook there. That's really where I hang out the most. And then I do have a website that's kind of being revised right now, but it is there so that you can get, my tantrum tips. Actually, you can get through there, and it's drkatygibson.com. And tantrum tips is just /tantrum tips. And you can go right to, that landing page to get that sent to you, and then to get on my email list. And of course, that links to my group and things like that. So that's where you can find out more about me.
Okay. And then I know you offer a few free things. Can you tell us what those are?
Yeah,
you just mentioned the tantrum tips.
Yep, the tantrum tips. That's probably my my kind of biggest freebie, because it's a whole kind of little book. But I also have one on mealtime tips, which is another common struggle with kids. And with 4 kids, I can tell you, it is a struggle to get everybody to eat, right? Because they never like the same things. No. But I do have that available on my website too, the mealtime tips. And those are probably the 2 most popular freebies that I have.
Okay, perfect. And is there anything else you want to make sure that our listeners know?
I just want you to know that I, made this group for moms so that you can have more confidence, and you can ask any questions without feeling judged, or, offer topic suggestions for me to talk on, because this is what I love to do. I love to give moms more confidence and to help with that overwhelm. And I also am now developing a mentorship program. So it's great, like, to have all these tantrum tips, but how about applying them to your specific child? Then you're trying to go through it and you're like, oh, this is way harder than it sounds. I need extra help. But you could have, myself as a mentor to help you, through that. So I have a program for that, and you can find it on my website and within the group, but that's the first place to find me. And it has, I have gotten a lot of positive feedback on the group that's helped moms kind of work through some of those things, or maybe things they never even thought of because it was a topic somebody else brought up.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time.
Yes, you're welcome. Thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you so much for joining us today. If you could do me a favor, if you like what you hear, could you leave us a review or take a screenshot and share your favorite takeaway on social media? And make sure to tag us over at raising_healthy humans. Now go out and enjoy more movement throughout your day.